Ukraine's overnight drone strikes ignite Ryazan Refinery and plunge Kursk into darkness. Russia woke up to a reality the Kremlin has spent years insisting would never come. In a single coordinated night, Ukraine struck two of the most protected regions deep inside Russian territory, setting one of the country's largest refineries ablaze and leaving an entire city in darkness. Flames rose over Ryazan despite claims of successful interception, and power grids collapsed across Kursk as 16,000 residents were suddenly cut off. These events did not simply expose physical damage. They revealed cracks spreading through Russia's energy network, air defense shield, and internal stability. What unfolded across these two regions may be the clearest signal yet that the war is no longer confined to the front lines, and that Moscow's ability to shield its own territory is weakening far faster than expected. The question now is how far this unraveling will go, and what it means for the Kremlin's war effort in the months ahead. Today, at approximately 2 a.m., developments inside Russia shifted abruptly as two major regions, Ryazan and Kursk, experienced simultaneous disruptions caused by long-range Ukrainian unmanned aerial systems. What unfolded over the course of a single night indicated vulnerabilities within Russia's internal security and energy systems than anything the Kremlin has attempted to project since the beginning of the invasion. For the first time in months, not only the front line but also deep civilian territory, hundreds of kilometers from Ukraine, entered a state of visible instability. Ukrainian strikes exposed weaknesses in Russia's energy network, refinery protection, and regional emergency response systems, raising new questions about the sustainability of Moscow's war effort. Hours later, by dawn, the situation in Ryazan had escalated into a major industrial emergency. A fire visible from several kilometers away illuminated the night sky, contradicting early official claims that the region's air defense forces had successfully intercepted incoming threats. The Ryazan oil refinery, one of the country's most important fuel processing hubs, was reported as the primary site affected. Local recordings captured the flashes and rising smoke that suggested a high-impact strike on an internal component of the refinery complex. The sequence of events provided little room for ambiguity. A major industrial node had been struck, despite repeated Russian assurances of layered protection. The Ryazan oil refinery, operated by Rosneft, processes approximately 17 million tons of crude oil annually and supports production lines for gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and industrial lubricants. Several analytical channels, using comparative footage, sound signatures, and light dispersion, estimated that the fire originated inside a section of the refining grid designed for aviation fuel and high-octane outputs. These products directly support Russia's military operations, especially air transport and mechanized logistics. Because of this, Ukrainian planners have frequently classified facilities like Ryazan as high-value military-linked targets. According to independent monitoring groups, the Ryazan complex has been targeted 8 times since early 2025, indicating an ongoing effort to degrade Russian wartime fuel production capacity. Minutes after initial impact, the regional governor released a statement asserting that the attack was repelled and that the situation was under control. However, ongoing fires visible from residential districts contradicted the message. Civilians posting from the outskirts of the city described flames reaching dozens of meters high. The discrepancy between official statements and visible outcomes generated confusion and sparked renewed public debate about the effectiveness of Russian air defenses. As videos circulated across Russian social media, many questioned how a facility of such strategic significance could be repeatedly struck, despite intensified defensive measures. From a military strategic perspective, Ryazan fits Ukraine's evolving counterstrike doctrine. The objective is not symbolic damage, but the systematic reduction of Russia's internal fuel processing capacity. Long-range drone systems, adapted for low-altitude navigation, radar absorption, and multi-vector approach patterns, enable Ukraine to reach deep targets, once assumed to be secure. These unmanned systems operate at relatively low cost, while imposing exponentially higher economic damage, a principle central to Ukraine's asymmetric warfare approach. At approximately 3:30 a.m., as Ryazan firefighting continued, a second disruption occurred in the Kursk region, roughly 450 kilometers west of Ryazan. Local authorities confirmed that 16,000 residents were left without electricity following an attack on regional energy infrastructure. While officials did not name the targeted site, emergency descriptions, combined with the deployment of engineering brigades and mine inspection teams, indicated a strike on a transformer node or high-voltage distribution point. The location sits far beyond the immediate border zone, highlighting the extended reach of Ukrainian unmanned systems. To understand why a single climb can ignite an entire Russian air defense grid, the story has to rewind. Civilian recordings documented entire neighborhoods in darkness, with only sporadic backup generators running in isolated facilities. These outages underscored a broader issue within Russia's internal security grid, its inability to simultaneously protect border regions and deep hinterland infrastructure against dispersed, coordinated drone activity. For the Kremlin, the Kursk blackout carried implications well beyond temporary civilian inconvenience. Energy lines serve as the backbone of logistical support networks across Western Russia, supplying industrial regions that indirectly sustain the war effort. When these systems fail, the ripple effects extend into production, transportation, and communication channels. Combined with strikes on fuel processing centers, Ukraine's multi-axis pressure creates a cumulative operational strain, one that erodes Russia's ability to maintain prolonged military output. From a strategic viewpoint, Ukraine's method appears consistent with policies publicly supported by Western states, including the United States and several European partners, who have declared Russia's wartime energy infrastructure a legitimate military target. Under this guidance, Ukraine has invested heavily in long-range unmanned platforms capable of bypassing traditional air defense systems, such as Pantsir S-1 short-range interceptors and S-300-400 long-range batteries. Multi-route ingress, low radar signature frames, and autonomous navigation allow groups of drones to exploit gaps within Russia's vast airspace. By 5 a.m., conversations across Russian civilian networks became dominated by two themes: uncertainty and frustration. Residents of Ryazan asked why fires were visible despite official claims of successful interceptions. Citizens in Kursk questioned why power had not returned hours after the strike. These reactions signaled a shift in public perception. For years, the Kremlin maintained that war would not reach Russian territory, but burned refineries and powerless districts contradicted this long-standing narrative. The psychological impact of such events, especially when concentrated within a single night, can influence domestic confidence in government preparedness. Analysts note that Ukraine's approach is neither random nor improvised. Each strike fits into a broader objective: weakening Russia's internal war support infrastructure. Refineries feed fuel into truck convoys supplying armored brigades across Ukraine. Power stations sustain industrial sites, manufacturing equipment, and spare parts. Logistics centers store materials that allow Russia to rotate units and sustain artillery operations. By targeting these systems, Ukraine aims to constrain the supply chain that enables Russia to maintain offensive capability. This strategy reflects an important shift. In the early years of the conflict, Ukraine was primarily focused on defending frontline territory against encroaching Russian forces. Over time, with increased foreign support and improved domestic production, Ukraine developed capacity to conduct precision strikes deep inside Russia. As these capabilities matured, Ukrainian planners designed a phased campaign aimed at degrading Russia's war economy, rather than only contesting active battlefields. Around 6 a.m., despite circulating evidence, several Russian correspondents reiterate Kremlin narratives that all threats were intercepted, and that damages resulted from falling debris. However, available evidence, thermal imagery and commercial satellite imagery, and local footage indicated direct impacts consistent with unmanned aerial system strikes. This discrepancy highlighted the widening gap between state messaging and public observation. The more this gap expands, the more difficult it becomes for authorities to maintain the perception of strategic control. In both regions, energy infrastructure emerged as the primary point of vulnerability. Fuel production and electricity distribution are foundational to national stability and wartime operations. When these systems falter, The effects reach beyond immediate material loss. Economic production slows, transportation becomes constrained, and public confidence erodes. As more citizens experience direct consequences of the war, whether through blackouts, rising prices, or disrupted services, internal dissatisfaction increases. Ukraine's objective appears focused on generating this pressure gradually. Each strike against a refinery or power station reduces Russia's industrial and military resilience. Each outage forces regional officials to allocate resources toward emergency response rather than frontline supply. Over time, these cumulative effects can alter strategic balance by stretching Russia's internal capabilities thin. Military analysts widely agree that Russia faces three converging challenges. First, fuel contraction limits the mobility of armored units, transport convoys, and support vehicles. Second, energy instability weakens industrial output and disrupts long-distance logistics. Third, rising public discontent increases internal political pressure on decision-makers. When these conditions occur simultaneously, as seen in Ryazan and Kursk, the combined impact becomes more significant than the individual strikes. As the morning progressed, discussions on regional forums increasingly questioned the official claim that the war remained distant from domestic life. Phrases such as, "Why are we in darkness?" and "Why did defenses fail again?" trended across local platforms. These sentiments indicate growing recognition that the conflict is no longer isolated to Ukraine's territory, but has entered Russian daily reality. Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russia continues to expand, assisted by improved technology, foreign support, and domestic production lines for long-range unmanned systems. As this capability grows, Russia must allocate greater resources to internal defense, diverting assets away from the front. This redistribution could reduce Russia's operational momentum in contested areas like eastern Ukraine. By midday, damage assessments from Ryazan suggested prolonged refinery downtime, which would likely reduce near-term fuel supply and increase rerouting and repair costs. Repairs of high-temperature processing units and cracked distillation towers require specialized equipment and trained personnel. Prolonged outages can disrupt Russia's internal fuel distribution network, increasing strain on alternative refineries and reducing overall supply. Similar constraints apply to Kursk, where restoration of high-voltage substation components may require weeks, depending on the extent of the damage. Taken together, the events of the night revealed a critical pattern. Russia's internal protection systems are not able to prevent repeated strikes on strategic energy targets. As Ukraine expands its long-range capabilities, the frequency and depth of such operations are likely to increase. This dynamic places the Kremlin in a challenging position. The government's statements and the actual reality on the ground are completely different. Ukraine's strategy is clear: weaken the internal sources of Russia's war capability, fuel, energy, and logistics, while gradually shifting the psychological landscape inside Russia itself. Ryazan's fire and Kursk's blackout demonstrate this approach in a single, coordinated night. Both regions serve as reminders that modern conflict extends beyond front lines to the infrastructure that sustains them. As the day concludes, a central question emerges. Can Russia reinforce its internal defenses and stabilize its critical infrastructure, or have these attacks marked the beginning of a deeper and accelerating internal collapse?